See if I can figure out a way around that.
Okay, do. So, welcome everybody. I'm going to call to order the March 11th meeting of the Mobility Planning Committee. Going to do a roll call. Justin McCullen is here. Mo Handel
Here.
Karis Lustig
Here.
Tim Bulger
Here.
Paul Malta
Here.
Tyler Kaprowski
Here.
James Goldstein
Here.
and I've already said Justin McCullen is here.
Oh, it's 6.
The minutes from the previous meeting, has everyone reviewed the minutes, and is there any adds, subtracts, edits, concerns, comments?
Move approval.
Hearing.
Yep.
Hearing. We have, oh, is there someone online? Oh, Duncan, you are here.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm here.
Yes, and so the record show that Duncan Allen is also in attendance. And Alex Klee is also attending from planning. Duncan, did you have any comments, concerns about the minutes?
No, I looked at them. They're fine. Yeah.
Okay. So Mo Handel motioned,
Second.
and we have a second, and I'll have to do a roll call vote. So Mo,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
and James,
Yes.
and chair votes aye. So that's unanimous. All right. So for an update on the transportation plan scoping grant, I want to throw it to Tyler to give us an update on, because I know my understanding is it's tomorrow and we want to get some input, et cetera.
Yep,
Okay.
so I have a scheduled meeting with MAPC representatives tomorrow. They want to go over, they've agreed to help us with the scoping of this project, so that's great. I think that I just wanted to kind of give everyone an opportunity to pass along any thing that they specifically wanted to see or ask about, so that I can bring that up with them tomorrow morning. But I think that, we did go over sort of the general shape that we think that this would be taking. I think that the example, I sent everyone an email with a link that Tim had sent me with the street. It's like a street guide from the city of Minneapolis. So obviously the sort of the scale of the information would be a little bit smaller, but I think it does a great job of breaking down things on as a different types of roads, what are their characteristics, how can we categorize them, and then typical treatments for various things that you want to see in terms of traffic calming, things like that. So that's sort of the baseline of where we're going to be going with this project. And again, I want to stress that it's not so much of a plan all these projects for us and we're gonna check them off on a list. It's more of a setting a shared vocabulary, a shared understanding of this is how we can slot this policy in here, this is how we can slot this guidance there, and turning that into something that we can then use in these meetings and beyond to plan some of these larger programs, like the sidewalk program we've been talking about. So does anybody have any questions or any comments about that project that they'd like me to bring up in that meeting? Was everyone able to take a look at that link? I can bring it up on the screen.
That was a good, yeah, thank you for sending that too. It's, I love the listing of the streets and the categorization. Sorry, Karis.
I was just gonna say, one of the things I think we talked about last time was part of that master planning, just making sure that the rail trail would be considered a component of that.
Yep.
So that way it's integrated into a transportation plan.
Yes, that would be, I like, those streets, I think in that plan, they have like, I don't remember now, a collector road or, like a residential road,
Yeah.
and maybe like an off-street path, I guess is what you call that, because, there's a rail trail, but there are other opportunities too, so, just another kind of classification of something that we can look forward to in all the projects that are going on. Sure.
And just a question, I did look very briefly at the Minneapolis thing, but I don't recall. Is there a distinction between roads alone and roads with bikeways on them, bike lanes on them? And if not, it seems to me that would be a useful thing to include.
Sure. I don't think, because I think it was categorizing just based on, the right of way and the
Yeah.
width and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. The applicable, whether there was a dedicated bike lane to the markings weren't necessarily part of that, but that's something that I think, might be worth putting in, especially if we're coming up with an inventory of the town. So we know that, when certain roads are up for, refreshing, then we can incorporate, a bike lane if we need to, so we know where it is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Duncan.
So I was gonna say, I think, this has the reputation of being a pretty well thought out set from a place that gives careful consideration. But I think we do owe it to ourselves to kind of go through it and, see if the classification or taxonomy makes sense for us, works for us. I think that, it's really only when a bikeway gets exclusive or an active transportation thing gets exclusive apart from roads that it kind of becomes something very different. I think, bike or pedestrian treatments for other classes of road are, my opinion is they probably belong with those classes of road. But, they obviously a separate trail is a horse of a different color. But yeah, I'll spend some time with it. And I think everybody who hasn't maybe done that, might want to do that, see if seems, a good functional match, or whether there are things missing, or there are things that we don't really need to have.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff that's more specific to a highly urban environment. So maybe that could be something that it doesn't have to necessarily be by tomorrow's meeting, because we're not gonna do all the work tomorrow. It's gonna be an iterative process. So people have suggestions as to pieces of this that we think are important, pieces of it that are not applicable. Then we can kind of work that out and have our own taxonomy and our own categories.
Is there a possibility of leveraging GIS with some of the information that we end up compiling together? I don't know the maturity of our GIS program, but whether we can take advantage of that, or whether there's going to be some significant resourcing that would be required.
I just actually texted Tyler to ask if he could invite our engineering division into the meeting, who manages the GIS. Just to make sure as part of the scoping that whatever the deliverable is, we can then take that information and import it into our GIS system.
Yeah, no, I think it's very valuable to be able to do. Yeah, thank you.
So are you saying they're calling in now, or you mean tomorrow?
No, sorry, I was indicating that I would bring in somebody from engineering or a GIS administrator into that meeting for the scoping, to make sure that what gets scoped can then be integrated into our GIS system.
Yeah, yep.
Then it'd be great to see, all the collectors, visual representation of all local roads. Mine was to, have that pulled up, and then the bike paths, et cetera, and, school, that's already an addition. School lots and stuff like that, but.
Yeah, I think
Somebody needs to be on mute here.
Hey, can everyone mute,
yeah, I don't see any reason why we can't do that, as long as we have, data on it, we should be able to.
Okay, great. Is there another comment?
Well, I was just gonna ask a similar question, just in terms of, does that inventory exist and how do we go about collecting it? Because I think that'd be a great, once you have that data, you can do so much stuff with it, so.
So we have a road condition index layer in our GIS. We have centerline data as well in our GIS, and then we also have sidewalk condition index data that is also there. So that's why I think bringing in the GIS coordinator would just help make sure that whatever information we get, we can import into our system if it's not collected already in our GIS, which I think is one of the general standards for GIS data.
Is there, so there, this is gonna be like a street classification, is there a circulation component to it? And like, we're looking at the layout of the road, I guess here, but what about circulate, like, what the purpose of each of these roads are? I don't know if that's within the.
Like usage of the road?
Yeah, like, or,
Classification, you mean?
you know, like for, I wanted to say like, you know, maybe Greendale Ave, like, is that, appropriate to be a road that like takes traffic off the highway and moves it from one side of the town to the other, or should it serve a different purpose than like through traffic? Should Mark Tree Road be a through traffic road, or should it be a residential road? I think that's more of a circulation than like a street classification. I don't know if that's within what MAPC is gonna be doing, but
I think that's a very good point. Because does the GIS classify neighborhood roads through streets, regional?
So I think when I talked with engineering and I talked with the town manager, the last time they recall us doing anything similar is over 20 years ago. And obviously the way that roads are being used today, because of a whole host of technologies, is not the same way it was done before. I think maybe the question is, or the question I have is, are you looking at how it's being utilized currently, or how we think it should be utilized?
Those are two different questions,
Yeah.
and I think they both are legitimate questions.
So the first piece is what we're doing now, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that there'd be various methods for how that's determined. I'm sure as part of our scope, we would build in some sort of, modeling those traffic flows, determining, how each, like the arterials are being used. How are people traveling through town, east to west, that kind of thing. And then it's sort of, once we have this information, then I think we will have some recommendations as to how to influence to move one of these to a different classification, and what are the treatments that can make that, so.
Yeah,
I don't
safety
know
zones, speed zones, slowing down traffic here, people will
Yeah.
push.
And then that's more of like the engineering design study, traffic management of looking like, okay, let's say, for example, we know that anecdotally, right, Greendale Ave does take traffic from 128. If you do treatments to it that would make it less conducive to that, what's the after effect, right? So it's like, where do they go down a block, right, and go down, Dedham Ave and Webster to try to get around it?
Push the balloon, it just pushes.
Yeah, so I think like getting the inventory now tells us what we have, and then when we go to make changes to how a road functions, we can then run models that say what it will do to other roads to make sure that we're not just pushing a problem to another location.
But we also want that traffic on the highway, so somehow in there, it's how do we get traffic on the highway off of, Greendale Ave.
The other thing we probably should be thinking about is we're changing the zoning. It's likely it will change. So there'll be at least another almost 1,800 units in particular locations that has road implications. So we should find some way to recognize that if we're doing that kind of an inventory.
Okay. Yeah, so capacity and how that can affect.
Anticipated maximum demand from local, because we can control the local to some extent.
Right, and you can, roads that might be not large enough, you can do parking exclusions, you can, there are things that you can do to make it so that it is more tolerable, from a throughput perspective.
But that concern though, Mo, is decades, and it's not housing production, it's zoning.
Right,
And zoning hasn't had much of an impact in the last 20 years, in terms
But
of
it's-
downtown, so.
but it's intended to have an impact.
We will
So
see.
we should know what the potential, I'm not saying as an argument against the zoning, I support the zoning.
No, I understand. It is long-term, full build-out potential.
Right,
And that's a different issue than planning for something roadway-wise in the next, number of years, to me anyway.
So
Well,
I think
that-
holistically, it's not only, holistically, not only is it, yes, you can look for the longer term planning, which is why, we have Alex and her position kind of influencing here, but there's also shorter term, schools as well. You know what I mean? The change of use of schools, that's gonna change traffic patterns. There's other things that are going to be more medium, but nonetheless, this is why we actually have to look at it holistically. So I think that all aspects are important, but
And I think that James's point is good, that we need to know what time horizon we're
Mhm.
looking at, but I don't think we should limit ourselves just to the short or mid-term.
Fair enough.
anyone online, Duncan or Alex or?
I guess I'll just say
No.
one thing about that, which is that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Just that you're all right about the MBTA community zoning. I just want to add that I think the hope of the state is that, people use it as transit oriented development. And, it's the development is supposed to be within a half mile of transit stations. So I think the goal is that people are utilizing that. I know realistically people have cars. And the zoning does have a parking component to it. But I just wanted to add that I think part of the goal, first goal is housing production, but I think that the thought process is that hopefully people will be utilizing the transit as well.
Hopefully.
And I would also think as far as classifications go, I imagine Highland Ave and Chestnut are going to be at whatever the highest threshold is that we have for transportation.
Right.
So I doubt that it'll, I don't think there's anything that could kick it up higher too, as far as
Right.
the type of traffic that we're trying to convey on that corridor. Because you already have a high volume of traffic, you have to accommodate trucks and other type things to service the downtown. And I don't think that will shift. And I doubt that the model will be like 10,000 versus 15,000. I think once you probably hit 10,000 trips per day, you're at the highest level of classification.
There's, if I may just make a subtle point on that, the people always sort of treat traffic volume as an attribute at a point. And, it's simple to sort of draw lines and say at 5,000 or 10,000 or 15,000, right? There's a functional difference. But what also ought to be considered is because in effect, they call it either the average trip length at a point or, whether this is in effect local or through traffic. So you can have a situation where you might tolerate, a certain level of congestion or what used to be called low level of service on a Great Plain, if the rest of it is okay. But I mean, average trip length on Great Plain is pretty long. And whereas someplace else, which is a stretch of street which is influenced by people, parking and loading, the different volume can mean different things in different places. And a consistently large, long volume, which points towards through traffic, needs a little bit of thought sometimes, as opposed to concentrating on a few blocks where there might be congestion.
Thank you, Duncan. Alex, you still have your hand up? Is that the second comment here?
I'm sort of backing up a little bit, and I'm sorry if I missed something. I was sick at the last meeting, but in terms of this project with MAPC, I think it was called the Transportation Master Plan. Is there a timeline for it in mind? I'm just kind of curious. It seems like a big undertaking, but it also seems like a lot that this group can use as guidance moving forward. So I was just curious about timeline.
So there isn't a fixed timeline. This was sort of expedited because there was an opportunity to work with MAPC from grant. And really right now, all we're looking at is just the scoping of the project, we're not at the execution of the project, although I got the impression talking from MAPC that this might be a project that they might be interested in once we finish scoping it. So it's not like it will not be a quick turnaround for the actual end product. I think we're thinking the scoping will be a relatively, a few month process turnaround.
Yeah, what we submitted with our application for the MAPC technical assistance was that it would be about 6 months to develop and put out the RFP, and then another year or so to actually for that for whoever was selected to develop the plan. That was what we submitted. And, it's not a master plan in the sense that they're gonna tell us all of these projects that we're gonna be doing for the next 20 years, as much as it's that baseline inventory and classification and vocabulary.
Does
Thank
anyone
you.
have? Thank you. Does anyone have any questions with regards to that item for the MPCC? I think that meeting is tomorrow, and we'll get a report back on at the next meeting.
Yeah. Well, one more thing I wanna mention, I am working on getting, the MPCC email address working. We had some technical issues. I had to basically start over, but, I'll be using that to kind of help share some of the stuff that we're passing around, and, I can give some updates as to how that plan is going through that method.
We'll be on the website on our page, right? So the public can send comment if they need to as well, right?
Yes, I think it's already there,
Okay.
but I think I updated it. But I'll double check.
So the next item is the draft agenda, which I believe Tyler had forwarded out before this meeting with regards to our semi-annual Transportation Committee Summit, which we have scheduled for next Monday, the 18th.
May I ask the time of that meeting?
6:30.
Yeah, 6:30.
6:30, and how long are you anticipating? I'm trying to eliminate a conflict that evening.
I don't know. I think it all depends on how many people show up and the dialogue, that's the interest in dialogue.
Yeah.
So I don't know what an end time, we don't think we have a fixed end time, but or at least we did in mind. I'm sure it's not gonna be like a
Right.
planning board meeting.
Probably like 90 minutes to an hour, to 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, and where?
At the town of Powers, yeah.
And it will be covered by the Needham Community Channel as well.
Right. I can certainly be there for part of it. but-
So, yeah, I wanted to pull up, because I was driving. Through. Not that I was reading. So I'll pull that up and we could talk about the agenda. What time did you say that, Tyler? Oh,
Like 30 minutes before.
yeah, okay, so, there it is.
Oh, yes, I don't know if I saw.
So, yeah, I can't.
Out of my.
Do you want me to log in?
Yeah. Unless you can like Teams it, I don't know. It's pretty interesting.
So, we're looking at, it says our charge, which is the purpose of the joint meetings to align activities, projects and planning initiatives to facilitate public awareness of current and planned public works projects. This meeting shall constitute a regular committee for each, regular committee meeting. And as that's being pulled up, we have, kind of introductions where we're kind of talk about, who's at the table. And what the actual, some of the meeting objectives are. I'm just waiting to. Hold up. And this will be zoomed too, as well?
Yeah, I can,
Yeah,
I see the Zoom link. So that in addition to the Needham channel.
yes, so it'll be similar to like select board.
Big leagues.
Yeah. Speaking of which, still looking for a volunteer to help me run the Zoom. If somebody is available.
Unfortunately, I will be out, and
All right, no worries.
I'll ask Daphne if she wants to do it.
Yeah, I asked me.
She's sitting right outside, right?
Yeah, I'll ask her. Oh, yeah.
So can everyone see the remote? You can see the,
Well, on
Can
a
you-
small side,
You expand the type size or what? I mean, it's hard to read.
we're working on that. So, without having to actually just read what's already that you have in front of you. So, are there any questions with regards to this? And does this look like an agenda that is something that we want to do for our first meeting?
It's fine. I'll just note that I'm on the Rail Trail Advisory Committee and there's nothing here that relates to it. But it's a pretty inactive committee too. It's almost a reactive committee, unfortunately. And we don't meet as often as perhaps we should. But let me give it a little bit of thought, and it's also, I mean, there's nothing in the near term that DPW is gonna be involved in. So it's probably fine that it's not here, but it is a little odd that the Rail Trail Advisory Committee is one of the three committees that is represented here, but.
I think some of the thought process, although it's not the charge of the Rail Trail Advisory Committee, is you sort of get like the bike hat, even though.
Right.
Like for all purposes, not necessarily just for the rail trail.
Right.
And so certainly talking about the markings and the treatments that we might be adding to
Yeah.
existing roadways would sort of have an overlap, but I agree, it's not like a clearly in your charge
Right.
conversation.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason for that is the rail trail related projects have been pushed off by the select board. So I think for now and for this meeting, fine, hopefully, a year or two down the road, there'll be actual projects to talk about.
And this meeting is focused on the projects that are currently in the queue for construction. The fall meeting, the intent is for us to talk about our capital projects and our 5-year capital plan.
Ah.
And that also might be an opportunity to have that discussion as well.
Yes.
I do think that those, that part of the charge is for the three groups to get together and discuss our goals. Right? Is it each different committee has their own goals for the year, and that's what we're there to discuss. I think you should maybe include the rail trail. There's 2 rail trail projects. There's some work that can be done on them now, so I don't know if it was in there. It's a discussion point. It's kind of puts it in the forefront, and it has there's public there that we're talking about it, things that need to be done. I think just for an example, the extension to Newton, the next thing to do is to send a letter to the MBTA and ask them if they want the line or not. So, in our plan for the year, can we send that letter this year? Part of, the same way we're looking at the Webster Street traffic calming, that's what we're doing, could that be included in there? If the rail trail wants that in their goal for
I think that
now.
I think that would a lot depend upon what the rail trail committee wants. So I think that, and because this is a policy setting, this is but the tactical work that. And you said, I mean, is the rail trail committee the one that's sending the letter to the MBTA, or that to come from the select board or Kate? You know what I mean?
Select board, yeah.
So, does anyone have any comments on how that we could we can incorporate it? But I also understand we don't want to promise something that's already been pushed off, at least for a little bit,
So I'm wondering if it makes sense after introduction, because I was just getting into the meat of the presentation type stuff from my side. If there isn't a period of time, a 30-minute or to talk about goal setting for all 3 committees and where there's overlap. And maybe that's where it comes out.
Okay, all right. And so are we also each of the committees are gonna send all of the representatives that are able to come? Is it,
I think it's gonna be, I think which I have to remember, because I gotta post it probably, tomorrow, or the next day. I would believe it would be a posted meeting for all three committees.
Okay.
Has, forgot the name momentarily, the head of Park and Rec been notified of it, already or not?
Tracy?
Stacy.
No,
Stacy, I mean.
Yeah, Stacy.
I have not talked to her about it, so I will confirm that
Because
she's available that
She
day.
organizes our meetings. I don't think she's aware of it, and I haven't made her aware of it. I guess I should have.
It's
but,
fair.
So, okay, yeah, so that's probably a good way to put it in is during kind of an initial. Because yes, I don't, like we said, we don't want to mention a project that doesn't, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's just gonna cause more confusion for the public, and this is really what we're doing this for, is ultimately the
Right.
public to.
I'm not sure it makes sense to have 30 minutes devoted to it, as you suggested, because there aren't actual projects that are within 2 years, probably on the rail trail side, but having a few minutes to introduce the three committees, say what they do, and a little bit maybe how they, you know, how they interact around projects, to me, would be useful. I don't know if a half an hour, I mean, do we have that much to say about?
I didn't know if there was just any conversation between the committees that you would wanna have as far as like what the priorities are for the committees. But that, if you think it could all fit under introduction, then that could come out and you can talk about priorities for your
Well,
committees as
that
part of
we
that
have, yeah.
introduction.
Yeah, and that we could do. Priorities.
Naive question.
Do we wanna take the opportunity to use some of these capital projects as case studies for this grant program? Be like, this is how the street is being used today, this is how we'd like it to be changed in the future, how does the planned work fit into that, is it move us in that direction? Or,
So I think these are sort of, I'll call it like actions that we're taking pre-study. So, particularly Data Mav and Webster Street are treatments that we're doing that were not part of our standard treatments before, that we're trying to adapt as far as sort of safe speeds criteria, but we haven't adapted a standardized criteria. So for example, we're taking Data Mav down to 11 feet lanes with 10 feet lanes under the bridge with the chicane that we're gonna be adding in because we're adding a legally compliant sidewalk underneath the MBTA bridge. Those are treatments that we're sort of doing in a non-standardized way. I think the goal is that if we get sort of an inventory, a classification model, then we'll have some standards to apply that we know when we're doing a major arterial road. We want to do a, 11-foot lane. We want to have, these types of treatments are appropriate, RFBs. We would have sort of a standardized approach. So these are sort of our attempts maybe to create some standards, but without having created those standards yet. So I think it would be useful as part of that study to talk about what we've experimented with, because one of the things we had talked to the state about, we're doing 10-foot lanes under the bridge, because that's the only way to accommodate it's the only way to accommodate a sidewalk, but it's something like the state has not adopted yet for their treatments. So it's like trying to figure out what our standards would be.
Hey, Duncan?
Yeah, I'd just like to suggest, this agenda comes across as very much roads and streets. And I think there are two sort of almost news items that might be worth working in here. I don't know how important the public information component of this is, but with respect to the rail trail, there was a Needham Newton committee that, made a little bit of a recommendation with respect to the rest of the rail right away. And, very, very much pointing towards an expectation of that being for active transportation and not, shared with shuttle buses or something. I mean, that's kind of out there. It was a bit of a finding, and it may or may not influence the thinking about our rail trail. The other is the committee that is actively working now on the transit side on quiet zones. And, that's still, very much in middle stages, but, it's moving towards some pretty serious, recommendations and ideas coming forward. And I just think that that's although they're not in the same state as this year's construction projects, it's not like we're ignoring things other than roads and highways.
Sure, I think that maybe it's worth a call out without going into full, full detail, and then we can actually refer people to the, to the videos. If they,
Maybe sort of like
Yeah.
other projects of significance that are not fully fleshed out yet.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, Duncan, if you want,
Like
if
that,
you even wanted to give a, 1 minute blurb about, about the quiet zone when it comes up. Because I think it is an important issue. It is an issue that is affecting the community and tangentially related to, transportation. It was actually part of the old transportation committee's remit. But yeah, we probably want to keep that short as just, and certainly we can refer people to the information that's already online. I'm part of that committee too, but I'll let Duncan do that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's reasonable.
To make the introduction portion efficient,
Mhm.
would it make sense for each of the participating committees to just do a short bullet point of what their priorities are?
Yeah.
And then leave it at that rather
Yeah.
than go into a dialogue, because that'll consume a lot of time.
No, that's fine. We can even do that if then anyone has any questions or wants to, actually dig a little deeper, then there's an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I think when we were drafting this agenda, we were kind of coming at it from just literally what the charge was as written.
Right.
And that's very, it doesn't have that sort of public education component in it, but if we want it to be something where a resident can show up to the meeting, learn a bit about each committee, as part of that, then I think that's probably a good idea to do at the beginning, and then kind of, we can put in pieces of that as we go along and sort of, say, and this is gonna relate to that project, or.
So we just envisioning, would, a member of the committee to come up at each, for the MPCC, for the Transportation Safety Committee, for the rail trail, just to give a little high level bullet points.
Yeah.
Just from a logistically perspective, because are we having I'm assuming all the tables in the front like we do kind of for town meeting-ish or whatever, and kind of, we have the.
Yeah, so the way it's set up that I had asked them to do is to make like a horseshoe at the front of the room with a podium and then audience seating behind.
So like the downtown improvement project.
Yeah,
The way that was set up.
if we think something different would be better, then we can still change that, but,
I think it's fine.
as written here, like. DPW is gonna be doing a lot of talking, so if we want to build in, these other pieces and their priorities and introductions, then. I think it makes a lot of sense. I wasn't sure how much of the public facing aspect we were intending for the
Sure.
meeting.
But to most,
That's not clear, yeah.
I mean, we could probably cull it down to a slide or two, and then if anyone has comment or concern or anything that we can. So then I'll work with you on the TSE ones that,
Since we are adding in rail trail and, the quiet zone and so forth, I wonder in the future, probably not for this one, but it's already been announced and so forth, if we call this the mobility, summit as opposed to transportation summit. Because it is, I don't know, it has a different connotation, but.
So I think, I don't know why I'm asking Tyler to scroll up, but I'm the one who's done it. I will have to take a quick look at the charge.
We were just going right.
It has that
I
language.
think it said
Okay,
the
that's fine.
semi-annual
That's
transportation,
fine,
yeah.
that's fine.
But again, I think, as I think about what a rail trail could be if fully developed, I actually think it's transportation.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, non-vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fine.
any other comments or concerns with regards to the agenda?
Just that, I take it we should send somebody, a slide or two in advance on like rail trail priorities, so it's all loaded in or not?
Yeah,
How do you wanna do
so Justin, do you wanna? Are we thinking like? You come up, talk about TSC for a little bit, James or whoever else, is it gonna be like part of one presentation, or like, should we kind of work in parallel?
No,
here?
well, I think there should be one slide deck, but you could have three people talk about the committees and just, have one slide for the TSC, one slide for, rail trail and related to, just for the sake of not having me speak a lot, if someone wants to talk about the mobility planning committee, or I can get someone to talk about TSC, either one, just it would make it easier in optics. Related to a last item on the agenda, which is not unforeseen events from the chair, which I'll talk about.
I could.
Perfect.
The other thing I think we wanted to talk about, because it came up last time, there's nothing in the charge itself that talks about public input. But I know that was part of the conversation that we wanted to have some, so I didn't know if you had any vision as to what that might look like, where people just have the ability to speak and we kind of just take notes, or what would be kind of the vision for that component?
I mean, I have to be careful what you wish for. I want to get away from having the public hearing perspective of like, everyone has a time limit and whatever, but, because I think this is, if we can push this as an educational outreach, public information, program of the mobility committee, or transportation, whatever it is, that I think is a better way, and then we can allow for some public interaction. I want to kind of not, and maybe if anyone has anything else to say, I don't want to have that, because suddenly some people are going to start talking, and then we have to like cut them off, and then it's like a public hearing.
So
It's
the
like,
only concern about
Yeah,
that is that with the new public, can't think of the word now, but with the new Supreme Court enabled behaviors
Yes.
that are allowed, you cannot cut people off for objectionable content anymore.
correct.
So the only thing you can do is cut them off at time.
So that's fine, we can enact time.
But you could say like 5 minutes. I mean, I
Right.
think 5 minutes is a pretty long time
Yeah,
to talk
very
about
long.
a transportation issue or
it's-
something like that.
If you have a 5-minute time limit, you're gonna be there till midnight.
Okay, that's fine. We can do
But
that.
I think, it would seem to me, each of these committees meet separately and publicly.
Mhm.
So, to me, the most value something like this can have is to let people know when those committees meet, what they're
Yeah.
talking about, and what they're dealing with. And then have people ask questions about what they've been presented with here, since it's not a public hearing, it's an education session. So if somebody doesn't understand what's being presented, then they should have a right to ask about it. And that way, people will know where to go when they have a particular issue on their own particular priority.
That's a very good point.
So do you want them to ask that at the meeting, or do you want us to
No,
sort of
let them
direct
ask
them?
at the meeting if they don't understand anything that's being presented. But if you get into a dialogue, which I'm all in favor of dialogue, but a situation here where you have 3 different related committees, and then you get into all of these particular issues, trying to hash them out here.
Right.
You'll be there forever and
Yeah.
you won't resolve anything.
And this is, yes, if it's, I want a 4-way stop here, at whatever, that's fine. This is a matter that you
Go
can
to
certainly
that
bring up, and we have a process where you do that. And yeah.
But we don't want to hear the details
Like-
of this meeting.
Right.
I'm just curious if there's a way to structure this in a way that would not get overly complex. I mean, we present here the meetings as being, this is all about the DPW's proposed work schedule which is what it's going to be. And I'm just wondering if whether we can, with just another, bullet point that relates to all 3, you just have something like, activities, by other committees or something, and just have those 2 or 3 bullets. And just say, there's a quiet zone study underway, there's whatever, there was a recently completed Needham Newton trail, multi-use trail study.
Mhm.
And like was suggested is, point people maybe at the websites. But just to, admittedly, it's sort of expanding the objectives of the meeting. If the meeting objectives literally are just to go over the DPW list, then, we fulfill that by just doing that. I just think it wouldn't hurt to just sort of, if in fact the purposes are coordinating among the committees, we just sort of say, okay, what is your, you know, currently the top of your list, what is your biggest activity or most significant activity? You know, other than, you know, interacting with DPW and advancing projects.
And I think the fall meeting is sort of more of the, because these are when we're talking about the construction season, these things are pretty fully developed. But when we go into the budget season and we're developing the budget for the upcoming year, that's when there's more flexibility to really have a conversation. If someone says, I want you to add a roundabout here or something like that, that's where there's some flexibility to look into it. Once we're at this point of the process, we already have the funding for that particular set of
And so the
projects.
other, okay, sorry, so the other meeting is explicitly the fall meeting or whatever is tasked to do that.
Yes,
But even on something like that, wouldn't that go to the traffic management committee and not this group before it went
So,
anywhere?
because I'm starting to think that we're looking like, if one was to say, what is the TSC's objectives, yearly objectives, we hear from the public, and then we react. So it's a very reactive committee, and that's why this committee was formed, to be proactive.
Mhm.
So, you know what I mean? So the objectives are really, that's the vehicle for the public to enter into, you know, their voice to be heard about requests that they can do from a safety perspective. So there really isn't that much more other than helping to coordinate and try to, you know, do those lower hanging fruit, you know, and I know that's where, you know, we have some funding to be able to do that. But it's, that's it. And that's all really TSC is. So I think I'm kind of, as we're hearing more, this really should be just about, you know, a public education outreach of what DPW is doing, kind of similar to what was done at the Transportation Summit before.
yes.
Where, you know, this, and the public can really see, we can talk about structure. We can say, we have a committee that does, here's from the public. We have a committee that talks about, you know, and that's, you know, from the select board has tasked them to be able to look at a rail trail, the design, you know, what can we do? What are the benefits? And then make recommendations back to the select board. We have a committee that is looking into X, Y, and Z, and this is when they're empowered by the select board. And that's, you know, I think that's really more rather than, and that should stop. I know Duncan was saying, kind of agreeing with that, it should be shorter, you know, blurbs. And then we can go into saying the DPW, this is how they look at projects. These are the current projects that we're kind of looking at, the large capital projects, and then going on to what we do for regular maintenance. And then any questions, and we're gonna kind of keep them, you know, just to avoid, you know, us here all night, that we'll try to, you know, take some comments and we'll try to answer some questions here, but some of the questions are really gonna be answered within the committees. And these are the resources available.
So I'm a little confused. I like the idea, and I think we're moving away from it, of having a slide or at most two for each of the three committees to introduce them to each other and whoever's watching. Are we going away from that? Because, and on that slide is, I think, basically maybe a tiny bit about objective, but it's the top couple of priorities of each committee. And I think all three would take at most 5 to 10 minutes, and maybe even less. It's
Yes.
one slide each. I mean, let's say 10 minutes. I think that's worth doing, even though I totally agree the vast majority of the meeting is DPW's.
Right.
I do have a question about the DPW. There are a lot of items here. Do you have some estimate of how long it's going to take to introduce each of these? Because there's, if I'm not mistaken, 11 of them. If it's 5 minutes each, that's an hour. If it's a lot more than that each, then I think we're running into time issues, maybe if we do want to have any discussion. So it's just an observation / question.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about it. I think it's a few of them I think are gonna be more involved. I think Webster and Dedham Ave in particular, just because they are. Even though it really is, there's not gonna be a ton of hardscape changes. I think it's one that people are gonna notice a lot more than like the pavement list that we have, which will probably be like 2 or 3, 2 minutes for the 20 streets that we have on that list. So I think those are probably the 2 most involved items. And then we actually had an internal conversation as to whether or not the items that we have on for 25, if we're gonna keep them or not keep them on. I think it's more just talking about where they are in the process and less about finished, because we haven't finished Mark Tree or the downtown. So we'll time out our section of it, but I think the idea, it sounds like the introduction would be, maybe 15-20 minutes at the most.
Max, yeah.
And then maybe we would try to keep ours to 30 to 45 minutes, I would think, and then that gives some opportunity for questions and clarification.
And we do that at the end, correct? We're
Yeah.
not doing it in between each.
I think
Yeah.
so, yeah.
We have a lot to
You'll never
cover.
finish.
We have a lot to cover, but I think we're not gonna wanna dwell too much on any one thing.
I think like there's gonna be people, and we always run into this, who wanna know like, why is my road getting double rubber chipped and why am I not getting
Yeah.
paved? Why do you not like me? And we can explain, you know, the methodology and why we do certain treatments in certain locations and why we alternate treatments for life expectancy of roads. And the benefits of doing that, and we can do that as one big thing as opposed to every single resident who's getting double chip complaining that they're getting double chip. So I think we can try to handle some of the bigger topics in one conversation as opposed to
Yeah,
separate
Cause,
ones.
'cause that's gonna be helpful for holding questions till the end, that people don't start asking things that we're gonna go into later in the presentation.
Yeah.
And we can just kind of, like you just said, just kind of the general, this is why we do this, you know, this is the list. We're not gonna litigate every single location for every single treatment, you know, it's just, so even though there's a lot of text on the agenda, you know, some of these things will get way more attention than others. You know, the list is the list.
And I think as far as, and I'm not to add anything to this, but, you know, we have the 3 committees and we have Public Works. And if they have a question as to like why their road is on the paving list for 25 instead of 24, that's a DPW question, right? We deal with the condition side of it as opposed to the utilization side. So, I don't know if it makes sense for us to do a bullet or 2, just explaining like, as we're talking about jurisdictions, if you have a question about where your road is on the list, you know, this is where you would go and we'll explain to you why we made those selections.
Yeah, I think it's really important that people know where they can get information.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces of information that the public often has trouble getting is that whether or not they agree with the rationale for a particular decision, somebody did think about it, it's not random. And I think to the extent that you can get that across, and also give an opportunity for people who may realize that there is something fundamentally flawed with the particular decision and or the rationale, that they have recourse to make that known and where to go with that.
Did we settle on who is gonna do the piece for the rail trail?
I think James.
James.
Yeah, James, okay. So Tim, Justin, James.
Yeah. Anything from your end in terms of? I'm gonna go around, from Duncan or Alex,
Yep, I think we're okay.
all right. Do you know when the posting would be ready to go? Because I can push that out on social media.
I can, hopefully have it by the end of tomorrow. We'll have the agenda posted. And then I know Amy's been working on some like,
Got it, okay, so
Graphics
I'll
or
just,
something, so
I'll
I'll
just
connect.
repost that
Yep.
probably if she does the time needed, okay. All right. Let me see, I did want to slip in one item on the last, so while I haven't made a formal decision, I will probably have to decant some of my, civic responsibilities as I am, the only candidate running for one position on the planning board. So, that is a significant administrative, change in terms of support. There's a lot of resourcing that would be involved. I sit on 5 committees, so I have to figure out which ones that I either need to resign completely from or just resign from a leadership perspective. So while it's probably pretty certain that I will not be chair of this committee, I might still get on the planning board. We can figure out whether there's representation that way. But either way, so just if anyone has any thoughts about that, that's something that, because I might still stay on TSC, and TSC has jurisdictional thing for me to stay here, but then again, I wouldn't necessarily want to have the role of chair, because that has some offline responsibility. So that's kind of what I'm putting that at. And yes, I guess unless somebody runs a successful write-in campaign against me on April, then I will be working with Alice more. So with that being said, is there a motion to adjourn, unless anyone want to make a comment on that?
I just want to make a
Yeah.
comment. I'm assuming that you would work with whoever it would be, because you have a definite that most
Oh,
of
yeah.
the rest of us. don't.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So,
that's why I even said if I would stay from TSC perspective, I can still bring that to the committee, but just not from a leadership perspective.
Right.
And someone else can tell me to shut up.
Well, I just.
Again. So,
I guess I am vice chair, right? I think.
you actually, no, you are, that's right, we did
so-
do a vice, so, yes, so, and then somebody from a vice chair
If it
perspective.
comes to that, I would.
But yes, no, you're right, we did vote, chair and vice chair, so that would be, then yes, so we'll offline talk about how that will work, but cool. Unless there's any other comments, concerns, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
No, second, excellent, and then we have to go through, so let's just go around the room here, Mo,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Justin says aye and James left, so that's 4-0. Do we have from Duncan?
Yep, aye.
That's a yes. Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're adjourned.
All right, good night.
Good
all.
night.
Good night. Thanks, Alex.
Bye,
Take
Ellen.
care.
I texted Stacy. I said I owe her. a copy. So hopefully she doesn't have a
By the
meeting.
way,
By the way, I need you on Monday
I
night.
like the speed feedback signs of, Dunkin' Donuts over there. They're nice.
Oh, for the safety.
School zone.
Yeah, school zone,
Yeah,
yeah.
what is it? They work outside of the school zone because it says 20. And it says school zone kind of small, so people see it, they just see
People see-
20.
where was this?
On Highland,
Highland Ave.
across from the
noticed there was
school. Yeah.
There was some funding from the state for a school zone.
They just gave us the sign,
There's one thing that I was wondering about from a design perspective.
the location.
No, the location's
The one
fine.
with the stoplight?
The light turns on if you exceed 30 miles an hour. And then it turns off, and then a car behind it makes it turn on again. So it sometimes appears that it's blinking. Which would confuse a driver at 7 o'clock at night to say, oh, do I need to slow down because it's 20 miles an hour? They don't see school zone. So, which is maybe not a bad thing because you're causing someone to slow down, but
To go 20
there,
miles. an
there's a
hour.
potential that, that it does
Disorienting.
cause some confusion.
So you're saying
It flashes between the person behind you and you, so it looks like it's.
When you go
blinking.
over.
I think they're programmed to just turn on steady and then turn off if someone's exceeding 30 miles an hour. I think that's the programming, outside of the school zone time.
Right.
Maybe even during, but that's blinking. But anyways, and then what happens is if there are two cars behind each other, it turns on and then turns off, and then it sees the car behind it and turns on again. And so that to someone's field of vision, that's actually looking like it's blinking.
Okay, yeah, I wonder if that's something we can. follow.
But I don't know if it needs to, but it's just something that's, it's just something up there. Yeah, and then we can
That's
Talk
good,
about
that's
that.
good to know, I mean,
the
we,
crosswalk, signs, I don't know if they can do, because it's a bit locked to do a second, you only have one on one side, and it's on the other side of the, street, that crosswalk of